we're only 26 minutes late. So congratulations to me.
Not
Tonight, tonight we have the Tonic Mole on. How's it going, man?
Pretty good.
Good. So, here's the crazy bit. Here's the thing.
Mhm.
I had this big plan, this big scheme. I was going to get some people together. We were going to spend the first hour just, going around talking about the savings verse or whatever the thing you call it is, and
Yeah.
and then we're going to bring you in and have a little powwow about it. That was going to be great. Unfortunately, everybody had to cancel.
Oh, come on.
I'm not even kidding. Jeremy had like some sort of thing come up, and Fly is sick, and Marmaduke fan got called into work.
Come on.
He's paying off them student loans, so he's got to make the Benjamins,
That's right.
Yeah. So it's just me, man.
Well, we can make it work. We'll make it work.
I think we'll have to.
Yeah.
I don't know, my computer while it's charging. Hang on. It's mostly plugged in here. I just gotta. There we go. Okay. So, how's it been?
Pretty good.
Yeah. So it's your first day, or second day on the Indiegogo, right?
Yes.
How far along are you? I have not checked.
Oh, not very much at all. My Indiegogos, I don't know. My Kickstarter crowd is super hyped and takes off, which starts tomorrow. Mm-hmm. My Indiegogo for Lily and Wepawet is when I really noticed it. It did nothing on Indiegogo, but exploded on Kickstarter, and I ended up making more money. It was my biggest title so far, but almost nothing on Indiegogo. Pure Kickstarter outdid Kickstarter and Indiegogo together. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why. I noticed that a lot of the crowd that normally goes to Indiegogo is going to Kickstarter. Mm-hmm. They have not told me why. And so I had, I was at like 2,500 on Kickstarter with Lily and Wepawet, and was at 300 on Indiegogo.
Wow.
And I was like, what the? I ended up extending the Indiegogo for 60 days, and it ended up reaching $1,000 or something. So it wasn't bad. But it took a lot longer. I don't know. I haven't figured out what Indiegogo's deal is. I'm not picking up, like Kickstarter, every campaign I pick up new people. Indiegogo, I just get buried. And so I get a lot of window shoppers on Kickstarter that I don't in Indiegogo. So anyways, I was going to launch Kickstarter and Indiegogo at the same time. And for the first time ever, Kickstarter held me in review for like 3 days, full 3 days. Now I'm always late, and I always ignore it because I'm like, it's fine. And this is my 4th or 5th Kickstarter campaign, and every time it's like 10 minutes, 30 minutes or something. And this time, when I actually put it closer to pushed it closer to the deadline, it wouldn't go. So I was like, okay, I'll do it Friday, which in hindsight, I had so much I always have so much going on. So sometimes it's obviously better to do Thursday or Friday. Tuesdays are terrible. I've launched before, like on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and it ended up fine. But ideally, so like this time I was like, okay, I'm going to build a better system for launching, like we did with it's like what we have with once the campaign's wrapped and shipping out, we have this system of how we box everything and ship everything, and it makes it super simple and very effective. I don't have that for launching a campaign. I'm just doing whatever I can. And so like, getting our mailing lists and getting people contacted and all that type of stuff. I'm getting to where I can put together these campaigns in a far less chaotic. It's always so. Anyways, then I ended up having where the Kickstarter it will be tomorrow instead of today. It got passed, but I was like, no, I'm not just doing it randomly in the middle of the day. I'll do a Friday, which is more ideal, I think, for me. And
oh man, maybe the best time to launch is like Wednesday at like 6 p.m.
Why is that?
I don't know.
I could, and actually, Kickstarter says Thursday, but I think that a lot of people get paid on Fridays and stuff like that. But one of my Kickstarter, again, I don't know what the deal is. I could probably launch it any day and it do pretty good. I just have a lot more hype there.
Well, and part of the thing with Kickstarter too is you don't really pay when that's like it doesn't really matter as much when you launch because it's just like, oh, I have this money in October. Yeah.
And see, I'm guessing that has a lot to do with it because even me, I don't want to figure out, oh, what's this? I just buy whatever I want. And I don't even have to my card's set up. I don't have to run anything. I'm just saying that. And so I kind of like buying from Kickstarter better than Indiegogo. So as a customer, I prefer Kickstarter. And so I'm assuming that that's a deal. And I think I just Indiegogo's algorithm or whatever just doesn't work for me but guys I'm right there with where we make the same amount of money, they're making it through Indiegogo and I'm making it through Kickstarter. So it's really weird that even in the same circles. But now I'm the only one that does campaigns at the same time because I'm always in a rush. I don't want 90 days or more between issues. I want as limited as possible. And so I run them at the same time. I have considered not doing Indiegogo because it's just gotten so where everybody's at Kickstarter, and it'd be so much less work. But there's still things that Indiegogo, for instance, on this campaign, if someone missed Lily and Wepawet, which I know a few people have asked me, oh, I didn't know that campaign was going or something. At Indiegogo, they can buy. Oh, and I have a new edition of Saving the World #1 where I redid a lot of the art because when I looked back through it, I was like, oh, because it was old stuff I'd done a long time ago, and I re-inked it, and I was like, well, I think this is good. Well, I've done so much work since then that looking back on it, I was like, oh, that needed a lot of work. So I went back and redid it, and it's being released with Saving the World #3. So I made it to where people could buy the Saving the World #3, and then as an add-on, any back issue I have or that Saving the World #1, depending on whatever they want. So they can custom build their own bundle. And I really like that. But if Kickstarter had that, which they have a beta going right now, and I applied for it, but I haven't got heard back.
Right.
Once you can build a bundle, then Kickstarter is going to be pretty attractive.
Well, and I think Nick Mueller did, or Mueller, I'm not sure how he says his name. Anyway, Nicholas, the Demon Hunter Raven guy.
Yeah.
I think he was in the beta program.
I see.
For his Kickstarter. I believe that you could add on stuff. So, but yeah. So, anyway, that's pretty exciting. I think it's interesting to see, what kind of works for what people. And I know we were talking about trying to do a Kickstarter for our exposition book, but then we lost our artist, and so we have to start over again. It was like we had a pencil artist, ink artist. The pencil artist went other places, and which is fun. But we do have to start over again. So that's great. We're 3 pages in now. 28. So
promote your inker.
Oh, I tell you what. Well, yeah, he's one of the company owners. So he's one of the partners. So I'd have to give him my job, and no. So anyway, I did finally. It felt like finally. Anyway, I read the Saving the World 1, Saving the Universe, Lily and Wepawet, and I also had picked up Sober off of the Comics Underground, and I read that too. First of all, I have a question about Sober. Is that supposed to be like a parallel time frame to Night of the Living Dead?
Yes.
Ah!
See, Night of the Living. I love all of the Romero movies.
Mm-hmm.
I have a story about that. But a huge fan of the Romero movies. But still, to this day, the first one, you know, I'm not the type of person who's like super nostalgic. I know when something's bad and things are better when it's new. You know, I know the difference. But when I go back, I'm like, that first one was so intelligent and so well shot and so deep. And the others that I love for different reasons are a little cornier, not as well made, and so on and so forth. They have different things, you know. Day of the Dead has the most gruesome violence and over the top and stuff like that. But anyways, long story short, I loved that time frame and all that. So I wanted to do it was actually the whole story it's a bit longer. Well, it's actually a lot longer, but it was written to be in modern times. But then once I was actually thinking about doing it, that's when I was like, no. It should be in the 60s. 63 is when it's supposed to be, which is when the Night of the Living Dead took place. And Sizzle ended up drawing it because I knew I'd never get around to it. I am a celebrity. In my own mind.
People are celebrating, so I suppose that counts, right?
That's something.
Cause celebre? Is that the
I'm very popular among certain circles. They're just small circles. But so now that original story, this happens to me all the time, which is weird. I'm a nobody that lives in a very small town, but crazy things happen to me, and I don't know why. I went and saw Land of the Dead because I was a big fan of all of them, which, you know, is my least favorite. But I went and saw it, and I got amped up. Like, I get really excited about something. I'll start writing scripts or something. And I wrote a story that continued the Dead series because I thought Land of the Dead, it didn't really make sense to me. Like, it wasn't the natural progression. I wanted this certain thing. I was like, no, you can't jump to that. It's like slightly less crazy. It needs more. So anyways, I wrote this big long script also I was a huge fan of Night of the Living Dead remake, the color one. It was totally different and far more aliens. It was kind of like Night of the Living Dead was the original was Alien and the remake was Aliens, you know, where it's a little more action, less depth or whatever. Anyways, I love the color version. And I was like, man, what if you made a comic book series that followed each of the survivors from each movies and you told longer stories? I contacted George Romero's son, George Cameron Romero, and sent him, I had character designs and scripts and stuff. And I sent him and sent these all to him. And now his dad was on the promotion tour for Land of the Dead at the time. And he said, well, I like these designs in this story and stuff. He said, my dad's busy with the promotion tour, but I'm doing a zombie cartoon. And I'm interested in having you do the character designs because I sent him all the artwork. And I was like, I'm very interested. That'd be, you know, pretty cool. I'm looking to do something along those lines. And we talked back and forth, but then the cartoon fell through. And he ended up doing a live action movie or something, and I don't know what happened. And so anyways, and then we went different ways. And that's what Sober roughly is that it's been reworked dramatically, but it's still that principal idea. That main character was one of the ones that was, and I think the main character was going to kind of be the survivor from the remake, which is Barbara. Yeah, Barbara. And so anyways, that fell through. So that's where Sober came from anyways.
Yeah, so I kind of picked up that vibe on it, but there was one point on it where I was just like, I'm not sure a woman with arms that small could hammer nails through a hickory bat like that.
Sure, she can.
You need a drill first.
You put your weight into it. That's what hammers are for. Anybody can do it. You know, and really, hammer is about aim, right? Because the hammer does the effort. If you hit it right on, you could have very little strength. Now, but then again, it's zombies, so you know nothing makes sense.
It's not a death of it. It's just one of those things where having hammered into it's harder than you think.
Yeah, especially a rounded surface. But she had the, you know, where there's the will to kill your husband, there's the way.
That is a warning for every husband out there.
That's right.
That's fair.
They'll figure out a way.
I said years ago I came up with a rule is never screw with a woman who cooks your food.
That's very true. It's more likely poisoning, but that wasn't nearly as bombastic as I was hoping for.
Well, you know, it doesn't fit the zombie paradigm as well either. So.
No, it doesn't. It's boring.
No, but I mean, it's just courtesy. Even if you don't care so much about self-preservation, it's just courtesy.
That's right.
Even in our day of more equal household responsibilities and all that kind of stuff, the fact is that they put up with a lot of nonsense from us.
Respect that they could poison you and they don't. That's really nice.
That's what love looks like. Now, on a side note, you are married.
Yes.
As am I. How long have you been married?
Legally married, like 10 years. Together, 21 or 22.
Okay.
Because at first we were like, marriage is for losers and posers, and but then we did it and we're like, no, that's pretty cool. So yeah, I think we were together. Yeah, we were together like 12 years, and then we got married after we lived together for 12 years, and then that's been 10 years.
Yeah, Amy and I just had our 20th anniversary last.
Oh, really?
Week. Yeah.
Nice.
We were only together about a year and a half before we tied the knot.
Yeah.
But it was like from the time we met until we got married was like a year and a half.
Yeah.
We had kind of a whirlwind courtship. So,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was the thing. I know I like, you know, you guys I see you interact on Twitter and it's adorable. And I love marriage. I'm a big fan. Like, you know, when you're 20 years into a thing, you either love it or hate it, and then you're probably an awful person.
That makes bad decisions.
That's my take, anyway. I just think it's cool. I think that's cool. But also, in reading your opus here recently, it seems like your wife is laced through it, like she's a thread that seems to show up every once and again.
I have no friends outside of like social media. I don't leave my house. I'm a recluse. I don't like dealing with people. And so my entire interaction is just me and my wife doing stuff. And so like the majority of conversations or things I have to pull from is stuff me and my wife talk about. So roughly Kira and Nora is random pieces of both of us. And neither of us, well, physically, Kira is obviously my wife. That's just what she looks like. But we trade places. Like Kira, personality-wise, is probably more me. And then Nora is more my wife. But their conversations kind of go back and forth a little bit. Mm-hmm. And so they trade positions. But certainly, yeah. And that's, you know, I think a lot of my characters are roughly based on my wife one way or another. I don't actually have a very good imagination at all. So I just base everything on someone I know, and I know like 3 people.
So, well, the trick is masking them well so people don't notice it.
That's the tricky part, making sure not all my characters are.
Yeah, you get down to even F. Scott Fitzgerald was notorious for putting people he knew, like, hide them away inside of his novels, you know, and
Yeah.
it's kind of an open secret. I mean, you've read The Great Gatsby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's sort of an open secret that Daisy was modeled after this woman that he dated before he married Zelda, right? And
Oh yeah.
she left him for a rich kid, just like what happened with Jay Gatz in the book. And so, but she shows up in several of his novels, I guess. The only one I finished is Gatsby, because
Yeah.
I'm not I don't take the time to read like I should. But
Oh, me neither.
yeah. But with it, there was a preview of one of his later books, and she walks up to him. The real life Daisy walks up to him, and she says, which character am I in this book? And he says to her, he says, I don't know. Which bitch do you think you are?
Well, that's like a lot of comic book artists either draw themselves or draw their spouse. And I actually had at the comic book store when I was signing, I had this conversation with somebody. And it was Rob Liefeld. The guy's, he has a wide square head and eyes further apart than some people, and they're squinty. And every single character he draws look like that, right? Like his Cable, his Wolverine, his everybody is based on the structure of his own head. Whereas J. Scott Campbell,
always draws his wife.
Always draws his wife, and he just changes her hair. And
funny thing about that is, like, every once and again, like before, like, it was known that he just drew his wife. Before that was common knowledge. Like, there would be all these people online that would just, I can't believe he draws these unrealistic people. And then a photo of her leaked, and everyone's like, oh.
Well, and what there's Joelle Jones that did Catwoman recently, and she looks a lot like her characters, and I find that intriguing though. But so yeah, I do draw a lot from my wife and less about myself. I think emotionally, I just don't like to see myself in comics, which is partly probably why I do so many female characters. Is I just don't care to see myself. Kind of like I don't like to hear my own voice and all this stuff. I'm just not interested. So I infuse my thoughts and ideas basically through a female character, and then it sounds much better.
Well, I think there's, when it comes to writing, I think we you write what you know, right? So I think it's a writer's job to get to know a lot of stuff, and that makes them more interesting to write. But at the same time, you write what you know, right?
Right.
So when Chris and I, as two writers, when we came up with our webcomic, right, we wanted to do something where we could, like, talk about living in rural America, but not Scotts Bluff. And we wanted to deal with characters that would, reflect our experience in school, but not our experience in school, right?
Right.
So we set our comic in Wisconsin, which is kind of like Nebraska, but not at all.
Right.
And we and of course they were, high school kids and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, everybody's been to high school, so that's the whole thing. But I think that we do end up writing what we know in a lot of ways. But one of the things I think is great about speculative fiction is because everything is myth and everything is form and everything is shadows of what is. Then you get to layer on all these things that are absolutely unlike your experience.
Right.
You fold those in with your own experiences and the things that you've seen firsthand. So
yeah, and see, the saving verse is like that, where I get irritated that every superhero at Marvel is in New York City, and I'm like, man, that city needs some help. And then DC makes up their own cities, but all of them are basically New York City, peppered throughout, but cartoon versions. Now, I prefer DC's fake cities because Gotham, it's kind of Detroit, it's kind of New York, but it's very much become its own thing. As Metropolis, it's cleaner and happier than any city in the United States. And
Oh, yeah.
so they've made their own cities. But there's still cities around there. Like everybody pictures Gotham City and Metropolis somewhere is way up there. And so I wanted to do a superhero universe in a part of this country that's never had superheroes before. Not any stay there. So Kira and Nora are in Kansas. And so they're between, it's a fake city I made up between Wichita and Kansas City.
Okay.
So they're right dab in the middle. And then, Lily, she's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And then I have some characters that'll be introduced in the next couple of issues of Saving the World. And they're like in St. Louis, Missouri. So I use some of the reels. Oh, no, I rename all of them, but it's basically St. Louis. It's called Saint something. But so all of it is Texas. There's somebody in Dallas or Houston, but I can't remember who that is. But anyways, it's all Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and places like that.
Right.
All this superhero universe will take place in, because
I love that too. And she, she's standing up when Kara in issue 1, she's standing up on top of that building, looking for crime, waiting for something to happen, and God damn it, nothing happens in this stupid town.
Right. Well,
I'm like, I live in that town. I know exactly what that's like.
Punchline by Antarctic Press, Bill Williams.
Yep.
He made, there's a similar line in there, and I had already written my comic, and I read that. Maybe I had released number 1. I can't remember. But anyways, and I read that, and I was like, exactly. So, that's why my comic is really them. The problems they're fighting isn't really crime. It's these weird freak things like themselves that chose the wrong path. Because I've seen one crime in progress my entire life. A kid was breaking into a house or something, and I called the cops. Anyways, it don't matter what rooftop you stand on, you're not going to see a crime. One in a few years, the superhero idea just would not work. There's no way. You'd have to walk around subways and maybe find a pickpocket and all this stuff. But a rooftop would be, and even if you walked around, the likelihood that you see a crime in progress is nil.
Yeah.
So anyways,
I've seen more, but some of that has to do with the fact of what my day job is. So
what do you do?
I work with mentally ill and homeless youth. So I'm occasionally, I've been there when people attack cops. So it's a little different, than somebody who's working at the Big Burger.
Right, exactly. And the type of crimes that need a superhero. Like, you weren't going, son of a gun, if only a superhero was here. And so I was like, that was a lot of the premise of what do you do? Does the world would it actually need a superhero? Arguably, unless they're going and beating up giant conglomerates, no. Poor people and stuff aren't the biggest threat in America.
Well, that's why we took an end run around it with our universe, where we actually trained superheroes at supervillains. We trained supervillains at supervillain high school. So I had a reader come to me years ago with our webcomic and be like, "Wait, so the superhero kids go to public high school?" And I said, "Yes." They said, "The supervillain kids go to supervillain high school?" I said, "Yes." He said, "The government pays for both of these things?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You got a story here, right?" I said, "Yes."
Yeah. It's very accurate.
Just wait. I will explain all of it. I haven't yet, but I will.
Right. Oh,
it's only been 15 years. Come on, give me a break.
That's the hardest part, is when you know what's coming and nobody else does.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, I had no intention of releasing a Lily and Lepawet comic. I was just moving on to number 3. And I had a few people saying, oh, I love Lily and Lepawet. And I was like, well, there'll be more shorts. And then I was like, but I have this story idea. And I was like, no, I can draw fast. I'll draw the thing as fast as I can, launch the campaign, and I'll be done. Then a whole bunch of horrible things happened in the middle of it, but I got it done. I had that seizure, and I've been on medication ever since. The past week, I've been coming out of it. Almost 3 months, I was gone. But I drew my comic and I shipped it, and so I think it's good. I hope so.
Actually, I just read it, and I have to be totally honest. I didn't get around to finishing it till this morning.
That's okay.
So it hasn't settled entirely. Although I will say that there is one particularly awkward scene that I'm still getting myself used to. Thought of. It's a little terrifying. Perfectly honest. A little uncomfortable there, Tonic.
It's, to each their own.
As the woman said when she kissed her cow?
Yeah, so, exactly.
No, actually, to be completely honest on it, like that whole scene, for those of you guys watching or who will watch later, I will not spoil it. Do you have a place where people can buy back issues from you yet?
I did, but now I shut it down. It was Indiegogo on demand.
Okay.
But then I closed it down because everything's available on the new one, and I'm trying to funnel them there so they can get back issue there. It'll just be 30 days.
Yes. You should read it. It's definitely worth it. But yeah, it was one of those things where it really begs the next stage in all of this. Because obviously like Lepawet, and if I remember you explaining, the name you got from an obscure Egyptian deity. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the original name they think of Anubis. So like with everything, it evolved over time. So originally it was Lepawet, and he is the opener of paths and stuff. And so as each, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of years, each new dynasty and stuff interpreted him a little differently. So then he became the god of the underground. But originally he was like hunting and crops. But the rebirth idea and seasons, and then all this, eventually you become like Anubis. But yeah, and that's who he is.
Yeah, but with it, it gives this idea, this nature to who the character is, that there's a story beyond the story he knows. There's something before that, and even though he believes that he lives at all time in all places, yet still there's something from before that he kind of sort of might remember maybe a little bit, but not. And then there's a time beyond where he's like, I'm not sure I exist anymore. And I thought between the implication of a previous existence or a previous form and the idea of a point in time when time is no longer fixed was a really interesting idea to play in. I still did not see that scene coming. That took me by surprise.
Ironically, I created Lily and Lepawet I created Lepawet in 5th grade, but his name was Wolfman, and he had the same head and outline. His silhouette has never changed, but he was just like a Batman ripoff. And as time went on, I was entering my teens, so all of a sudden he gets darker and darker, and he's been getting darker ever since, and he's had a million origins and all this stuff. But I think it was 7th grade or something that I came up with Lily, but she was just dead. She and where, spoiler alert, in this, she's dead when he finds her dead. So he's wandering through time and finds this dead body and decides to backtrack through time and make her not die. And so originally she would have been dead. And so loosely based on my original ideas. And but yeah, Lily and Lepawet, the most exciting thing for me was it introduces that there's a big deal going on, that I think when you read, like, Saving the World is really fun to write, but it's really about the emotion between the two girls and real, like, life drama.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of comedy up so far, obviously. Number three hints at a little more, but it's actually more more comedy than any of them. Number 4, though, hits hard. So number 4 is the first deal that Kira and Nora's lives aren't just jokes and funny. There's really things going on. And Lily and Wepawet, I hope, introduced people to the idea. And I tried the same thing with Saving the Universe.
Yes.
Is if you combine all those different weird things happening together, I think it starts. You'll see an outline of that something really crazy is going on.
One of the things that when in Lily Wepawet that I found specifically intriguing was the idea that Wepawet is more formative to the origins of these characters.
Right.
That he's somehow causative is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
Maybe not directly, but that's part of it, and that's an interesting aspect too, because you're talking about, you write a lot of girls because you don't want to just insert yourself into the story.
Right.
But at the same time, Wepawet is empowering lots of women. It's like,
yes, he is.
Is that creepy? I don't know.
And I'm going to do my next spinoff will be Stratus. I did a short 5-page thing,
Right. Yeah,
but I'll be in Saving the Universe. But I'll be starting over because it won't rewrite it. The tone and it's so important. Stratus links the Saving the World and Lily and Wepawet and all of it together. He's the tie that binds everything, and kind of the biggest mystery, because in Saving the Universe, he just appears in full costume in the middle of the street, and he can't really remember anything, and the world's all different than what he remembers. And so I was writing. The original script was much longer, but I just shortened it to 5 pages to get the idea that this Stratus character existed, and so I plan on doing a full like 40-page comic or something that introduces him, and what the real situation is happening. I'm not in a big hurry because, well, yeah, a part of me just wants to get to the big story, but rarely does like a fan or something go, "Hey, I can't wait till you just move on out of this whole, Kira and Nora business." I have Kira and Nora fans, and the big story involves them. Like, they are the main characters of the overall universe. But it changes things, there's a point in the future of the stories to where, trying to say it without spoiling anything.
No, I think I know what you mean, actually, in a lot of ways.
Right.
We're in a similar situation with our universe, although we don't really have fans per se. I just been doing this forever. I don't know if anyone does. But with it, we have this really long, multi-generational story of the 20th century, right? It goes up to, originally we were going to have all the things escalate to 2010, and then 2010 was 10 years ago, and I'm thinking we actually are going to have it escalate to 2016, and that's going to be the point where everything changes. And we'll probably get to it by 2028 or something. But but we have our golden age, our silver age, the bronze age, the pocket era, all that kind of stuff that kind of like folds into this big multi-generational story. And at the least, we have to get our high school kids out of high school. So one of the things we did one of the things that Rico and I did with the comic that we did on our Patreon and is now for sale digitally on our store, idealcomics.net shop. It's 24 pages. It's Greg from Forces, like like 10 years later, not quite 10 years later, in 2013, and he's working at a fast food joint in rural Wisconsin, and that's kind of that sort of caps off, like, almost 10 years of his life there. When all of his friends went away to go be heroes or villains, and he stayed behind to work at Joe Jobs, which is why it's called Joe Jobs. And that chapter is kind of that one. And someday I will be working, hopefully, with Carl Toons on a book that is going to be Chad's story years later about his time as a superhero. And those are going to lead into this other thing that has it's not directly about these kids, but it's what everything's been building up to.
Yeah.
But who knows what to get to that? You got to build. And I was talking to Barry, because my partner, business partner Barry, he's like, we got to do the big story. I was like, no, we'll care about the big story until we tell everybody who the players are. We have to introduce all of the players. We have to finally let everybody know who Jagged Princess's sister is. I mean, not sister, father is. Yeah. And like, I know and you know, and no one else in the world knows.
Right. Yeah.
Like 10 people care. So he really.
Well, it's funny, when I went and did signed comics at the comic book store, and you might only have 10 fans, as I do, but when I met one of my 10 fans, and they're just like passion and enthusiasm for Kira and Nora and the whole deal, that was like, this sounds dumb, but it's like, that's worth it, to have one person give a shit means a freaking lot. And so
I actually do know exactly what you mean, because we do have a few like long-term guys that have just been with us for years.
Yeah.
One is my pal Darby, who keeps up with all the stuff we have. Another one is Brian Lohr, and he's been a fan of ours for a really long time, but he's also another creator, and he just recently brought his zombie comic into our universe.
Oh, yeah?
So now he's on the staff, so we kind of lost a fan.
Lost a fan. Co-worker.
Because we brought him and his zombie comic over, and we're going to be releasing a special edition of that book coming up here in 2021. And the first issue, we're going to be relettering it all, and I'm really excited for it. And then we're working on a second issue and all kinds of stuff. So
yeah.
And it's going to fit into our mythology really well. So it's just one more part to just expand the world. But yeah, we kind of lost a fan.
And so I have a semi-solution, because I don't even know if we'll see what readers think. It's still so far away. I mean, it'll be 2022 before I remotely get close, and I'll probably push it out further, because it is the bigger the buildup and the more people give a crap, the more worth it is in the end. I do want to set up the basic idea, and now if I start faltering, I'm just going to rush. I'll rush it forward, and I'm like, well, I'd rather get it done fast and do it. But we'll see how it goes. But yeah, my plan is like issue 20 or something will be this big semi-conclusion and stuff. I have ideas of where it will go, and things will kind of hit a more stable, just monthly beat 'em up comic and stuff, where it's not I'm constantly building to this thing. But that for this first major story arc, it kind of, I'm thinking issue 20 would be amazing. I have written to issue 10, and it gets nowhere close to introducing any of all the parts. Almost all of the major storyline will probably be in these, like Lily and Wepawet is the first major part. And then Stratus will be the second major part. So most of it will be spin-offs, because Kira and Nora, they have story arcs. Also, I love when someone reads something and they see it, and like a reviewer or something, and they see it and they don't know it. I had a reviewer mention something from Saving the World #2, and I was like, he was this close, because I make spelling errors, but I do not make I rarely make mistakes with what I'm showing. So they see stuff and they go, oh, I think that's weird. And it's like, no, it's not weird. Pay attention. This is going to be a big deal later. And there's a lot of that stuff in Saving the World #2 that hints at a future. I think it's issue, I don't have my board in here anymore. I don't know, 6 or 7 or something like that. And so there will be, as the issues go on, if you reread from the beginning, you go, son of a gun! It was right there in the frame and I missed it.
Hey, Dominic, I got a question. After all of the trouble to get my microphone, I just realized I forgot to plug it in. And I'm using the mic on my keyboard, which sometimes is terrible. Is it picking me up okay?
It seems to be doing fine.
I'm not going to change anything then. I feel like the need to apologize to the internet.
It'll work out.
Seems to have. What a stupid day. So I want to talk a little bit about the tonal stuff, because there are several things in Saving the World 1 that I absolutely loved. And you're talking about kind of being a marriage between superhero comics and like 90s alternative stuff.
Yeah.
It is. It 100% is. It's a little bit of Ghost World. It's a little bit of Love and Rockets. It's a little bit of friggin' I can't remember the other thing I was thinking of, but yeah, I love this the way that goes down. It's really, really good.
And see, before I not too long ago went back and reread, because I don't know what it's kind of like you don't know what you look like to anybody. It's impossible. You just don't know. And I don't know what my comics look like or how they come off at all. I'm too close to them. But I went back and reread the comics last week or something. Well, I'd been away from them long enough, working on other things, that I kind of got a third-person glimpse a little bit.
Right.
And it is ironic. I'm sitting there. I'm like, I hope the 90s alternative comes through. And I reread them. I was like, you should be hoping the superhero comes through, because you just did the same thing you always did, a 90s alternative comic.
That was actually the second part that I was going to talk about. It really does feel like authentically superhero, like at the same time, right? Because like one of the things that you have in modern comics is that all of the heroes are conflicted about their heroism, and there's all of this pseudo intelligentsia nonsense, right?
Yeah.
No, you want to see people stop the bad guy. You want the whole thing, and like comics in the 90s still have a lot of that. And you look at Hitman even, and Hitman was more self-aware. It was more poking fun at the genre while still paying homage to the genre, because that's what Ennis does.
Yeah.
But it's still, I mean, like when Superman showed up, like everybody was in awe. I mean, like you could tell behind his keyboard was in awe of Superman, right?
Right.
And that was one of those things where it was. And Saving the World 1 and the bit in Lily Whippaway with them, it still has that spark that's in there where, they want to do the right thing because it's the right thing.
Right.
Also, I mean, that's because that's what's inspired Kira the whole time. Like she's been reading these hero comics because she believes in, the simplistic dream of justice. And even like, let's kick all the butts.
Yeah.
It's a simplistic view of it, but it's also it's an honest view of it.
Yeah.
And I love the marriage of, and one of the things I've always been a fan of in stories is when it's people that are really good at crossing genres, right? Where it's, and in order to really cross genres, it has to be both things perfectly, right? So, like a great example is Grosse Pointe Blank. Mm-hmm. Grosse Pointe Blank is an old man's comedy and a crime movie,
right?
It's the the sappy saccharine, we can't go home again, Tom Wolfe nonsense, and it's a crime movie, a serious crime movie with death and consequences. And if it's not both of those things, it fails.
Right.
And yours thing is it's amazing 90s slice of life stuff and also superhero stuff. Like one of the things that was, this was a little awkward maybe, but one of the things that like really nailed it was when she shows up to like stop the drunk people in a fight, right? Yeah. And she shows up there, Kira does, and people won't stop talking about her boobs, right?
Right.
My boobs are ruining my life.
Right.
Like that's a real thought women, large-chested women have.
Right.
I legitimately know this because my
right.
life is where it's like that's a thing where people, and like it was so real and so human.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, like she's moping and feeling sorry for herself, and then there's the car crash, and she has to, readjust her mind, rethink about this thing, and pull herself out of herself.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really good.
And the funny thing is, I think we've all had, because I know what that feeling she felt is because I've had it. It wasn't because of my boobs, but it was something, right? I was super confident and someone smacked me down like with something stupid. And you go, how did that take me down? And that was, the inspiration of that is, she's invincible, yet it's shocking. And, that's like with hyper intelligent people. They can be knocked down by the dumbest moron because that's how human society isn't the smartest person or the strongest even, it's about quips and stuff. And so, how that knocked her down. And I try to, I make an effort not to be too straightforward and to show multiple things. And one, I think a reviewer, he kind of didn't like it, but I felt like he needed to hold on and read the whole thing first. And I had someone mention it, and I said, no, you got to read the whole thing. It's the whole point. It's in number 2, when Kira and Nora show up and Roger is fighting it out with the police, and they're on the rooftop a ways away. And they gun him down, but that's between pages. And so they're like, oh my God, they just shot that guy. I was going to laugh when his clip fell out because he raises his gun and the clip falls out. I was going to laugh, but then they, killed him. That was disturbing. Now, I wrote that as that they're slightly amused, but horrified at the same time. Yeah. And they're like, he only weighed 90 pounds. You thought a taser could have, done that. And the guy was like, oh, is that a Second Amendment thing? I was like, no, keep reading. This is the whole point. So they say a taser could have maybe taken him down. But when Kira and Nora are being shot at, Kira smashes him with the car. That's the point. He was so fixated on that one page. I was like, what happens right immediately later? That's as close as me getting into a thing, just saying, hey, until you're the one with bullets flying by you, sometimes it's not all, and that's not a stance. That's just think about things in different directions. And so once it's them, she's smashing him with a car, and his arms get cut off and all this type stuff. He's dismembered. And then the final joke is in the end, he can regenerate any body part and all this type stuff. And the only thing that works on him is mace and tasers, but it was totally just a coincidence. So it was a joke going both ways that, when you're the one in the line of fire, you would be far more aggressive. However, ironically, in this situation, as it always is, a frickin' taser would have worked just fine. But, and so, I think that's how the closest I get. I wouldn't call it a political statement. It's a social observation of, if you take all those things together, that's really how life is. You don't know how it's like sometimes, and sometimes, holy shit, never be too certain about what you think, because who knows? Life is very complex. But now, and that ending, that was thanks more to my wife, because I had a comedy ending written and I thought it was funny. And she goes, well, it's funny, but a complete disservice to your characters. You make them into like Dr. or Mr. Magoo, like just stumbling through it. And I was like, I was drawing it, mind you. And I was like on the page before the third act. And she essentially said, your third act sucks. And I was like, why didn't you tell me this earlier? I'm drawing it. I can't really redraw at this point because I'm moving at a rather rapid pace. But the more I read it, the more I was like, God dang, but she's right. It is bad. It makes a joke when a really good ending could happen. And so I went and rewrote it to where Nora finally uses her powers. Well, she dodges bullets at one point, but she actually uses her powers of intelligence, which I hadn't done yet in his issue 2, and she hadn't got around to using a power. And so I had her use her intelligence and stuff, and I ended up with like 50 better jokes than the one I did. Because my favorite frame is when he's like, you can't, he goes, that's what plan B is for. And he's like, what's plan B? And she goes, mace, and sprays him in the face. I freaking love the hell out of that. And the peanut butter jelly time. While I was drawing the frame of them in the script, they say freeze or whatever. And I told my wife, I was like, he has to say it's peanut butter jelly time. Anyways, I thought it was hilarious. And so, anyways, yeah, and each issue, I think, gradually gets better. I'm kind of figuring out how to do more story, even more compact, and these types of things. And in issue number 3, it's split into 2 parts. There's an 18-page story that just follows Kira at work. So there's no superhero. Not really. There's a little bit that it mentions it, but there's no real superhero business. It's just her working at a fast food joint, and a lot of comedy. I wrote the script just to be straightforward comedy, and that's pretty much. But it helps establish her as a normal character more, and so it's comedy, yes. But I felt if I go too long without just showing them living, you just see superheroes. And, and that's kind of a problem with all comics. Bruce Wayne, it's like, well, he can't always just be in that suit. He has to do something normal at some point. And so, I think that makes a detachment that you don't really care what happens to them. And so I decided this issue mainly being dedicated to wrapping that up a little, and where it introduces what she does during the day. And then I do have a 10-page, it's a 12 or 13-page second story that I drew. The Big Burger is drawn by Jim Lawson, and I did the 13 or 14-page backup story that is Kira Nora superheroing up. And it's a little bit, of course, it's all slice of life stuff, but it's more slice of life than the first 2 issues, but there's still superhero fighting and stuff. I just move faster, but there's more of them 2 interacting and stuff, so you kind of get more of their friendship type deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's cool. One of the things I was also really surprised about was that they didn't know each other ahead of time. Like, right. I don't know why. When I saw it all, I just presumed that they would have been like, they're both people, they're from this, smaller city, right. They travel in similar circles, they have similar interests. Of course they're right. lifelong friends. And they're not at all.
And I guess because here's the ironic part. I do plan on doing at some point a Saving the World Adventures. Because not all readers are going to be interested in this super story arc. And part of that thing of me going, man, it's really fun just to write Kira and Nora fighting bad guys. And, this story takes huge, crazy roller coaster things that I think is the better story. But I still would like the ability to just tell Kira and Nora stories forever. So I plan on doing next year, probably at some point, a Saving the World Adventures, which inspired by the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle Adventures, which was based on the cartoon. It will just be a simplified origin. And you'll see characters from the main story. But all the origins are super simple. Like at the very beginning, there's a scientist and he has an atom smasher and he turns it on and it causes a shockwave that creates superheroes. And that's where Kira and Nora get there. And and I also had some people go, oh, my kids like this. I was like, I wish, but it's a little too spicy. It's a hard PG-13 most of the time. I can't super recommend it. I don't think it'll warp them forever, but depending on what else they've seen. If they can watch RoboCop, this will be fine. But besides that, and so I actually, it's kind of like Alan Moore, when he said, comics were meant for kids and to entertain kids, and nobody wants to do that anymore. And everybody goes, well, he don't. I was like, well, yeah, he don't. But he ain't wrong. He's very true. Comics were successful when they were targeting kids because adults love those kid comic books. They don't want, and then the second adults got into them, they go, oh, you want us to make them for you? Well, no, we wouldn't rate them in the first place if we wanted that. And, and I think there is a time and place. Like when comics were being made for kids, Alan Moore's comics were refreshing and awesome. But when every Klingon and Me Too person jumps on and starts doing the same thing, eventually you're like, oh, well, it was good when that guy did it. But now you guys are bad at it, though. But, well, hell, if everything was the quality of Watchmen and Killing Joke, yeah, I'd be like, this is great. But it isn't. All it got is stuff for adults and bad. And so...
I'm not sure about that, but that's a whole different topic. I think one of the things too is so years ago, I think I've told you this before. Years ago, one of the partners, Chris Lawton, wrote an essay for our blog about The Killing Joke and how he went back and reread it and thought it was misogynistic. And I was like, that doesn't seem right. I don't think you're right. So I went back and reread it, and I decided it's just anti-human. And there's only one character in the entire thing. Everyone else is a cipher. It's just the Joker. He's the only character. Everyone else is a cipher. It's crap. I hate it. Rethink everything about comic books, right? And I was like, okay, the Dark Knight Returns is okay, and Kingdom Come's kind of garbage. I was just like, and I went through like all of these greats, and I was like, I had to be like rethink them, because I read them when I was like 19, and I was like, woo! And then suddenly the 32-year-old me is like, no, that 19-year-old's a moron.
And it depends in what context I read a story. For instance, Killing Joke clearly didn't fit. It wasn't meant to be in canon, right? He just wrote this story. And so, of course, in his gritty, weird world, Barbara Gordon wouldn't dress up as Batgirl and run around. But people loved the story so much, DC made it canon. So suddenly that means that lady or the girl that was serving tea was actually Batgirl. And it was like, well, no, it don't appear like that was the case in that story. But what I loved about it was, one thing, it was early deconstruction. Am I still here?
Yes.
Okay, I had a thing pop up. Oh, I just dropped down the chat. So anyways, it was early deconstruction, so that helps. Once you've seen it a million times, it's not nearly as good. But the idea that, a lot of people approach the idea that why doesn't Batman kill the Joker? What is this, symbiotic relationship and all this stuff? And Frank Miller, you know, he addressed it in his own way. And in this way, in Killing Joke, it's Batman's as mad as the Joker. Now, I certainly don't like that in main canon. However, as a standalone story, I like it just fine. But there's tons of comics I love as standalone stories that I would hate continue beyond that point. Like that Snapshot is fun, but to be fair, when it comes to mainstream comics, what do I like? I don't know. It's all snapshots, you know, like I like the idea of like Nightfall, but I don't think it was executed very well. I love the idea of lots of stories, but I always hate the execution. But like off top of my head, like DC wise at least, I liked Ed Brubaker's Catwoman and a few other things like that. But
Catwoman was great.
I don't, of course, I don't look for DC and Marvel to do do good comics. They have for quite some time been, you know, they went from trying to sell Hostess cupcakes to selling political ideas. You know, they just swapped them right out. And so, you know, it always for me has been, it's why my comics in black and white. You know, I want, those were the things that I found so interesting. The best comics were always black and white. If you wanted something fun and popcorn, you know, you could go to the color DC Marvel, but, and there's certainly exceptions to the rule, like the Max and so on and so forth. Quite a bit of Image, because Image even had some popcorn stuff that is amazing, like Gen 13 and Danger Girl with J. Scott Campbell. I criticize Image for, you know, they kind of recycled a bunch of ideas, like with Wildcats, which was obviously X-Men, and all these types of things. Right. But for the first time in decades at the time, they introduced some new stuff that was amazing, and especially business model wise, but the Max and Gen 13 being two of my favorites that you couldn't have gotten from Marvel. Image invented a way of making comics which raised the bar so freaking high. Anyways, but like I was back once Image started to falter, like when they got super rich and just hired kids to try to make their comics in like 96 and 97. That's when I discovered Fantagraphics and European comic books. And the quality level was just through the roof. And that woke me up where I was like, oh, I mean, J. Scott Campbell is amazing, but come to find out there's been people doing that amazing of work. They just weren't hired in America, you know? And that's where it gets weird, where we have, oh, this will piss some people up. We have Jack Kirby, and we're like, amazing. It's like, oh, but you look at guys in Europe at the same time, and they could draw photorealistic without looking up anything, you know? And their action was this super, I mean, they weren't comic book artists. They were very, very highly skilled illustrators who drew comic books, you know? Nowadays, that's more common. But, you know, back then, so in America, we're like, Jack Kirby's the king. And, you know, he's drawing very simplistic illustrations compared to, well, you just look at an issue of like Vampirilla. Look at Frank frickin' Frazetta. Just Frank Frazetta alone.
Yeah.
What are we doing here, you know?
The thing about it is, even if you go back in illustratory history, right? You go back to Howard Pyle's stuff. You go back to the you know, a lot of that kind of those classic illustrators. And they have something, it's not, they have a level of draftsmanship that early comics just didn't have.
Yeah.
And I mean, a part of that was because of the speed, part of it was the simplicity, part of it was the market, right? You know, you have Bob Kane creating Batman, you know, with you know, a semester of art school under his belt, right?
Right.
Or whatever it was. And a lot of those guys were just getting started. But then at the same time, Eisner, come on. Eisner was top of the game.
Yeah.
And I don't think Eisner gets nearly the credit. And I'm not trying to like bag on Jack Kirby at all, because like I'm not as maybe familiar with it, you know. But at the same time, like you look at just the I mean, Kirby had a style, but like Eisner had a flair.
Right. Well, and you know, if you Eisner was with Lillian Wepawet, I had decided what type of comic I wanted to make before I knew it was going to be Lillian Wepawet, because like Eisner created the Jungle Girl comic with Sheena, and then you know, so many copies, everybody does one, but I love them. You know, there was Sheena, but then there was Jungle Girl. And then even in the modern era, you have Frank Chow did Shanna, the She-Devil for Marvel. And Sheena came back also. And then they had, there's Cave Woman from the 80s and 90s, which is, you know, Bud Root. Similar idea. And then in the Ninja Turtles, Ninja Turtles even had a Cave Woman. It was, what the heck's her name? I can never remember it when I need it. Anyway, she's the time traveler girl. And she travels to the caveman era, and she wears this thing for an issue or two. So anyways, the cave girl thing, and I wanted to do that. And but it was, you know, because I was like, man, you know, Eisner is the father of so much outside of superheroes. Like the rest of the, like almost every other thing other than superheroes is him. And then,
well, I mean, even the superheroes, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Midnight, which is his take on the Spirit, right?
Yeah.
And the Spirit's like, you know, straight out of that marriage of the pulp style and the early comic book heroes. I mean, it's just straight out of that. Is instrumental in the the other quality, the Blackhawks.
Yeah.
And dang it, my brain's skipping out on me. I'm forgetting some stuff, but yeah, I mean, he was prolific, man.
And admittedly, you know, then Jack Kirby, he created what probably became what modern comics are. You know, so you had the evolution of Jack Kirby saying for American comic artists, which also I would actually rewind one of my statements. I love professional illustrators and their effect on moving comics forward. And there's tons of beautiful European artists, Italy and France and UK and all this stuff. But you have Milo Manara and all these greats.
Oh yeah.
However, American comics aren't pointless, obviously, because they're the most lucrative for a reason. And I think that reason is, and why they're not lucrative now, is a 17-year-old knew how to write a comic for people. And actually Alan Moore said this. He said to the effect that, I think it's Alan Moore, might have been Neil Gaiman, hell, I can't remember. Rich people have plenty of things to do to entertain themselves. Poor people read comic books. It's the poor man's entertainment. And if you just pander to rich people, you're going to lose readers. You know, you need things that appeal, but it's not just that, because that's the most derogatory way to say it. But it's not just that. It's that we've already heard what college-educated artists do. It's stamped out, and we've seen it over and over. It's why movies suck. It's why comic books suck. It's why TV sucks. It's why everything sucks nowadays, is because the biggest change from the 80s and 90s to modern day is there was a complete halt on anybody that wasn't trained to do it.
Yes.
And they have no originalities. But that was like John Millis, I think. He's a screenwriter. If you loved a movie in the 80s, he had something to do with it. He had no college education. I think he dropped out of high school. I'm not certain. Anyways, Jaws, when Steven Spielberg had Jaws, he is like, I think my movie's bad. It's boring. It has no pinnacle. It's just a shark. And I have nothing else. He called John Millis, and John Millis come in and wrote the war story that the captain tells before everything goes to hell. And so, long story short, there was tons of these people creating amazing things that had no right to do so. And that's what made them amazing, was that they were unheard voices. And so their voices were very interesting to listen to. They had unique ideas because they had unique life experiences. And there's certainly an irony in modern mainstream comics of how much they push diverse voices in comics, that we should listen to them. And I agree that is the biggest problem with comics and has been for quite some time. And probably, the collapse really happened in 96. It was the only reason there was a boost wasn't because comics got better. It's because they made movies and a bunch of people ran out and looked at the comics and didn't like them and just stuck with the movies.
See, and I gotta say, I don't necessarily agree with that in a lot of ways. In some ways, I do, because I in terms of like being a long-term DC fan, right? Yeah. Like DC from 96 to 2002 was some really great stuff, right? But the thing happened, though, is that Kingdom Come happened, right? Mm-hmm. And slowly that started leaching into the mainline continuity, and it screwed everything up. And once you allowed that, thank you, Mark Waid. Once you allowed that, it destroyed the universe. But you have, young Peter David's Young Justice was ridiculously good. Chuck Dixon on Nightwing was ridiculously good. That started in 96. You had the James Robinson's Starman was ridiculously good, right? And Gaiman's Sandman's okay.
And see, and that's the irony about it was over. Yeah, it was the dead decade from 96 to 2010. The sales, there's a reason people act like, oh, comics are coming back. I mean, compared to where they were then, but the industry was so close to collapse that nobody cared. And so they just published anything and come out with Marvel. I'm not a Marvel fan. I've never really read them, and except from 2000 to 2005. Mm-hmm. They just didn't care. They said, "You go for it. Well, who cares? We're going to be." We went bankrupt
as long as you were in the club, right? As long as you were in the club, right? Because they had a whole. I mean, it was all sweetheart deals. That was the deal with it. Anybody who was trying to come in from the outside, you got blocked hard. Well, if you weren't already in the club, or you weren't making movies to start with.
Well, back before that,
because I was trying to get into the club in the early 2000s.
Around 2000, they did have. Now, it was established people from the outside, mind you, but like with Ecstatics. And then it moved into something else, and then Grant Morrison with New X-Men. No, they're not super outsiders, mind you. However, what they made was crazy. For Marvel, it was them throwing a Hail Mary. They thought it was over, so whatever, do crazy stuff. And for me, both DC and Marvel did their best stuff when nobody was reading at all. They had, the sales were half what they are today. And they were, I'd say NYX, another one of my favorites, all came out when nobody was reading. And I think that was probably one big downfall, is you have board members saying, well, that didn't work. What next? And by 2010, they started to move into this like, what is popular? Well, what's popular on TV and YouTube? Well, let's mimic that. And because good didn't sell, so they moved on to the next thing. What if bad? Was that sell? And unfortunately, it was terrible timing, because the movies in 2008 with Batman Begins and Iron Man started this lurch forward. And you could see that comics evidently started to launch up because all of a sudden you had little like Hastings and Walmart and GameStop and all these companies in the 2010 or so start to go and they're gonna carry comics because gaming was kind of had a bubble, but they knew that it wouldn't last forever or whatever. So anyways, and you see the bubble in the sales, comic sales, and it's right along with that peak with The Dark Knight and Avengers. All these people were leaving the movie theater, likely already were comic book fans, and were headed over, and I'm going to get back into comics. When they got there, they found that comics had changed dramatically, and they weren't like, well, worse yet, they weren't like the movies.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that Neo's in the chat's bringing up. Man, I remember giving all new, all different Marvel a chance, and boy, was that a conga line of disappointment.
Yeah,
and I'll tell you right now, Neo, that's when that was happening at the same time that we were starting our blogs over on idealcomics.net, and we were editorially divided on whether or not that was a good idea, and I profoundly thought it was a bad idea. But I had been watching the big two spiral the drain for 10 years at that point,
right?
Because they had been building things in the universe that weren't good, and like Civil War in Marvel was like that killed the universe.
Yeah,
they committed to a bit that was contrary to the fundamental premises of the Marvel universe.
Yeah,
and that was it was dead. It was dead, and that was one of the things that happened with that.
And you know. Sadly, they didn't realize that new people were. DC did. I would say DC did the right thing the wrong way. So they saw it. So in 2012, 2013 or whatever, they said, these are not long-term readers.
Mm-hmm.
These are new people. They do not care what we've done for the past 10 or 15 years. They're not interested. They only watch the movies and are coming in. We need something new for them to jump in on. And so they launched the New 52. Not a bad idea. A great idea, because they were right. They were selling 30,000 issues of a month of Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Once they went to 100,000, those are totally new people. So they say, okay, let's just reboot. But then there's, of course, people going, you can't reboot. There's the legacy. It's like, well, technically it's just since 1986 because you guys rebooted then. But so there's obviously was inner conflict. So they half rebooted. So Batman didn't reboot, but he kind of did.
And Batman didn't reboot with the Crisis either.
No. And
right. Like, I mean, like his origin changed, but a bunch of the old stuff was still canon. And that was one of the things. And like all of Green Lantern was the same after the Crisis. Right. You know, there was a whole bunch of stuff that didn't reboot in the 80s.
Superman was completely redone. The problem is nothing made sense. So they had a convoluted universe and made it even more. I tried to read from New 52.
Well, and one of the problems with that was that, like, and once again, this comes back down to what, you know, to what RJ in the chat says, is Marvel and DC did their best work when they had editorial staffs are comprised of people that loved comics instead of people trying to sell movies. Right. And he's 100% right on that, because one of the things that you had there is that, like, if you knew DC and you knew Wildstorm, you would know those universes are not compatible.
Right.
They have different fundamental rules to the universe and you can't put them together.
Right.
And then he said, we own all these popular properties, let's mash them together. They don't fit, they don't work. Wildstorm universe had Armageddon. It had worked itself to nothing because it didn't have good foundations.
Right.
Sorry, but it didn't. And so it wasn't built to last. And so they tried it. And so they took something that and they built something then that wasn't built to last. And the New 52 had a spike in popularity for people that had no pride, but then everybody stopped buying it because that's the fact. Like, I mean, like legitimately, like a bunch of people like me, these New Earth post-crisis guys, stopped buying comics. I didn't buy comics for 6 years after that. I rated back issue bins and that was it. Right.
Yeah.
And because I picked up a couple of issues here and there and I was like, trash. And that was, I couldn't even stomach it. I just couldn't. And I even have people that are like, no, Aquaman's really good. You're a huge Aquaman fan. And I'm like, nah.
Yeah. Well, and I read a little bit of New 52, but it just didn't gel with me. I didn't want to relearn what was and wasn't. I was totally on board with a complete hard reboot to where Batman Year One, and we go from there. I was not for, well, okay, Barbara Gordon's back because Killing Joke still happened, but Nightfall may or may not have happened, but Azrael will never reference having been Batman, so it probably didn't. Nah, I was done with that. Or the fact that his son is 13 years old, and they said that he'd only been Batman for 5 years. I go, so what?
Well,
when did he have this kid?
Yeah. Well, it's because he was aged in that unnaturally, blah 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 blah. Yeah, the whole thing. And and here's part of the thing is one of the reasons I bought into the post-crisis universe was because it had a lot of years on it.
Right.
Because here's part of the thing I want to get back to as a writer. Right. One of the things that I loved a universe that was built on the Golden Age, that was reinforced, it was buttressed by the work of Roy Thomas, who loved comics, right? And like All-Star Squadron and the new All-Stars and Starman, all that kind of stuff that just had these years on it. And I could buy into these years. And that's why when we came up with our comic universe, right? Yeah. But Chris and I are both big Roy Thomas fans. We're both, and he's more of his Namor and Marvel stuff, and I was more of the DC stuff. But man, we loved the years on it, so we built that into our universe, Yeah. And so that was just something that I just, it had to fit, man. So when DC came in and went there's no Golden Age, I'm like.
And
I'm out of here, man.
And Rebirth, I probably only read 3 or 4 issues tried of New 52, and I was like, this ain't it, because I'm a post-crisis guy, and them saying, okay, we're gonna redo Frank Miller's Year One is like, good luck with the axe you got. What? So anyways, I was like, I'm out. And then when Rebirth started, I was like, hold on. And so I read that. I bought Wonder Woman #1 and Batman #1. And I loved both. I loved Wonder Woman's, the Rebirth issue of Wonder Woman. And I was like, I didn't stick with it because I'm not a big reader. but I stuck with Batman for 50 issues exactly. And I love the buildup of King's Batman because he was just post-crisis Batman mainly, He was the same Batman. He even played with the idea that Golden Age, post-crisis, New 52, who knows, Because Catwoman referenced when they met as Frank Miller's. And Batman said, no, it was on a boat. You were stealing a necklace, like the Golden Age. So Tom King allowed the idea that this happens within the universe you want. Don't worry about it. So I really loved that. And his take, he did the first I've ever seen of little slices of life with Bruce Wayne, but as Batman, like when they go to the carnival, which a lot of people hate, but whatever.
Yeah, that was like the only there was of everything, because I'm a little bit different, right? I hate everything I've read of Tom King's except that issue.
Yeah, I love that issue.
That's an amazing issue. Yeah. It's like 27, something like that.
Yeah. And see, everything else, I will admit, in hindsight, it all depended on issue number 50 because it was all building to issue 50. But that issue is the only issue I'd tell someone, oh, this standalone issue by Tom King is good, because he's not super competent. He has nifty little ideas, but he doesn't understand how to string them together super coherently.
And that's where the editor comes in.
Right.
You're a big guy with this. Like that's why post-crisis DC was because part of what made Batman work so well was Denny. right? And that's what kept, you know, Alan Grant and Chuck Dixon from getting into fistfights.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, maybe Jay Lee and Tom King would get along if he was still the editor.
Yeah.
But once I loved how he did things differently. And that issue was the best example of it, that he approached things oddly. And I liked it because it wasn't about he jumped around, and that was good. It was also bad if he didn't pull it off.
Yeah.
When I hit issue 50, I was like, I'm done. I feel foolish for reading mainstream comics to begin with, and they taught me the same lesson I've been taught a million times, that these guys suck. And so I felt like a fool. But if you look at comic book sales, Marvel has had problems, especially for their individual sales. People go, well, they make up most of the industry. Yeah, but they have to print so many more comics to keep that hold. But their comics are less successful than DC, or had been for a long time. You look when Bendis started Superman and Tom King released Batman number 50, all of a sudden Marvel took the top 10, most of it, because that was a disaster. Yeah. But they'd spent so much hiring Bendis, they didn't want to back out. But what he was doing was wrecking DC's winning streak.
See, and that's one of the things that, like, just I don't. Once again, this is when editorial.
Yeah,
you can step in and be like, you know, we got a real hit on our hands with these, you know, the Super Sons, and it flashes back. And I mean, it was good feeling for the boomers who grew up with the ultimate, you know, future. Like, I can't remember the in World's Finest, there was a series with, you know, the son of Superman and the son of Batman, and they had and that was a whole thing in World's Finest back in the day. And then, you know, people that liked seeing, you know, those of us Gen Xers who grew up with Batman being like, you know, like his awkward relationship being with Dick, and then, like, you know, and Tim comes in and gives Batman some hope again after Jason's death. And I would like to, on a side note, I don't think they just, to address something that RJ said in the chat earlier, I don't think they just killed Jason because of Dark Knight. I think they killed him because he's a horrible character.
Oh, Jason Todd?
Jason Todd.
Oh yeah, he's terrible. I remember because that's when I started reading Batman and Detective, and around that time. So I remember as the big deal, they're killing Jason Todd. And there was few people who said, oh, that sucks. Everybody was like, yes, he needs to die.
Yeah. Brian Ball, thanks for tuning in. And I agree. Bendis moving to DC was the best thing to ever happen to Marvel. But anyway, back to the dealio. So, like, the Super Sons was such a great hit, and then the first thing that happens, Bendis is like, okay, I'm coming, but we have to break up the band.
I gotta destroy their winning streak. I'd never seen someone snatch victory out of the jaws of snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory like that my whole life.
At least it didn't involve a land war in Asia.
That's true. It was like DC was terrified of having to pay taxes. And they're like, wow, we need some losses. We're making too much money.
See, and that's the whole, I maintain that's been Marvel's operating procedure since Disney bought them, was that they're a tax shelter. They're a loss leader.
Marvel would actually make sense.
Yeah.
Because they make so much money everywhere else. With Disney and Marvel, the movies. Yeah. But with Warner Brothers, where are they making everything? Is disaster.
And here's the thing: is just before they hired Bendis, like, DC was starting to make money again, and it made them attractive. It made Warner attractive for the AT&T to buy them. Right? Yeah. They had just started making money again after a slump, and they're like, "Oh, hey, look. We're super profitable. You know, we're going to have these awesome movies. We've got Joss Whedon on board. It's going to be great. Right. Buy us." And he did. They bought him. Yeah. And then it's like, then all of a sudden, Bendis just like tanks the entire company.
Yeah. Oh, now the funny thing is, I always hated shared universes. I love Batman by himself. I didn't like that.
Aren't you making a shared universe, Tonic?
Yeah, that's the story. I hated that Superman could fly in and fix all of Batman's problems and zip away in like 30 minutes. And so I always liked Batman by himself, his solo deals. And so when they insulated him, and I never understood the attraction of shared superhero universes because I just read Batman. And then I read Jimmy Palmiotti's Power Girl.
Yes.
And that was, he looked at the character as she was. And that's what I think the major problem with modern comics now today is, that they're not doing this. They go, how can I fix this? And it's like, no, it is, that's it. Now play with your puzzle pieces. And he didn't approach Power Girl in the same way as anybody else did. Oh, and him and Justin Gray, they're co-writers. I don't know who did what, but and
they had a lot of dynamite stuff. Their Freedom Fighters was excellent.
Yeah, and Justin Gray, he's crazy, and I think he writes most of what I love, because Palmiotti by himself does a lot more kind of grittier action stuff, but whenever he's with Justin Gray is when they get in trouble on Twitter and crazy. So I agree with Brian Ball there. They took Power Girl and said, okay, we got this D-lister at best. She's only remembered for boobs. What?
Thank you, RJ. Presciently in the chat.
Yeah. And so how do you make that work? In, it was 2010 or something at the time. In modern times, how do you make Power Girl where you give a shit? And they looked at her history and said, hold on. For unknown reasons, she's persisted despite all else. She should have died in post-crisis.
Yes.
Why didn't she? She should have died a million times. Why didn't she? And she's just Supergirl. But she's not Supergirl at all. And her origin, they changed her origin because they didn't want to get rid of her. So they just changed her origin that didn't even make sense and bring her back. And instead of retconning that and starting over, they said, imagine being the one person in the DC universe who's lived through it all. Reality has been rebuilt around you endless times, and you're the only one that remembers it. And they had such emotional issues in that, even though a lot of it was tongue in, there was a lot of jokes in there.
Yeah, good.
But when she talks about how she's the cousin of Superman and he doesn't remember, but she remembers, when they thought she was, that was what it was. And they treated her like family, and now they don't. And there was all these huge emotional things, and it incorporated the entire DC universe and her in the middle of it.
Yeah, and like they did a great job in that too, of like bringing in like the deep cuts, like star technology that hasn't existed in a long time, and all that kind of stuff. Very good stuff.
And it was such an amazing love letter to the DC shared universe that it made me go, no, I get it. My problem isn't that I don't like shared universes. It's that I don't like stories only about those. And Power Girl starred the entire universe, but she was this core. Her emotions mattered, and it was her interaction with that shared universe.
Yeah. So
that inspired a lot with Kira and Nora, to where there is a huge shared universe around them, but it's about them. I'm not, I think that a lot of mainstream comics with Marvel and DC get too infatuated with, the best Star Trek episodes are not the ones them talking about the technology. There's a lot of Trekkies who go, well, the warp and the capacitors and they know everything about the ship.
But they care about the ship because of who's on the ship.
Right. It's the people
on
the ship.
I agree with you 100%. And I think that's one of the problems that we have, like a lot of modern comics, that they care about the packaging and not the contents. Right. And it's like, the Batmobile is cool because Batman drives it.
Right.
Because we know, and even if, and like, I'm a big fan of like the whole plot centric idea of storytelling, right? And I think you don't have to have every story be a personal Batman story.
Right.
You can have it be crime procedural. You could have it have all of the kind of stuff, and just have him be a static, unchanging character within a mystery story. And there needs to be more of those Batman stories that are just about the crimes, that are just about the culprits, that are just about thwarting evil.
Yeah.
And have most of it. And Batman doesn't have to change and grow in every story, and he shouldn't. He should not. That's one of Tom King's problems, is he thinks he should have personal growth. But no, Batman's core, that heroic core, needs to be something that is awesome, right? It needs to have something that means something. And that's like one of the things, getting back to Kira and Nora, to Kira's story. Kira has this, I mean, she has a complex journey to go through as a person. She's coming out of her shell. She's accepting adulthood in a lot of ways, I see. But at the same time, like, her heroic impulse, it's just pure, right? She's, now that she's superhuman, she can help people. Ta-da!
And see, like, if that is kind of how I would approach, you know, like where you say Batman doesn't really need to change. That's true, because he did. That's Batman year 1 and year 2. He goes through his growth. Modern Batman, he's Batman. We'll move on. And for me, the most interesting stories are when Batman is that rock that you can depend on. He is the Batman. He's already evolved and become the person he's going to be. And the character advancement is in characters like Batgirl and whatever Robin's happening at the time. But Batman is there as that rock. And they did that for a long time. Well, like you said, like 96 until Rebirth. I mean,
and there was even like in the early 90s, there was a balance of that, right? Because Jason Todd's death in 89, right? And then things are a little weird until they introduced Tim Drake, right? And so you have Batman going through this emotional upheaval, and like A Lonely Place of Dying is just perfect. And then Tim comes in, and Batman recenters himself, and Batman is stable, getting his back broken. Gotham City has an earthquake. There's Contagion, all this kind of stuff. And Batman is just Batman, until they introduce Damian Wayne. And then they can't, then all of a sudden he's like a child again.
They kill him. But with the funny thing about, like, with Kira and Nora, I start the comic following Kira, and but she is the rock. Like, she has things, but the real growth and like the person that will change the most will be Nora. She goes through massive changes, whereas Kira, she comes out of her shell and stuff and becomes a more confident superhero. But Nora is the one that has lots of things to deal with and stuff. But I think that you do need that rock, you know. You're a straight man, you know. Every comedy needs a straight man, and every drama needs that person that isn't a variable, that you know what is so that everything else can swirl around them. And I think that, you know, modern comics don't have a rock. I don't know. They're just
I think
all over the place.
Well, I think you're 100% right on that. Everybody wants to write Owlman, I guess, right? And that's what's like, what is up with that? I don't get it. But I mean, and that's one of the things with Forces, where through the course of the story with Forces, for anybody who's read it all, because there's like 600 pages, so it's a lot. We actually kind of have a role reversal where it starts with Greg, who's the hero-hearted kid who gets sent to villain school, and then Chad is the bully who gets sent to hero school. And so Chad has to, like, he's really out of his element, and Greg is too, but Greg's like, his dedication to do the right thing is sort of like shapes this world around him. But he starts through the course of it, he gets unhinged about stuff. Whereas Chad ends up rising to this level of heroism that he didn't even conceive of before going to school. And that's sort of where you see him end up after school is a remark of all that. Oh, also to the chat, Brian, do you mean you personally would enter your comic and kill the Joker, or would you have Batman do it? Because personally, I would pay money to. I would buy a comic of Brian Ball hunting down the Joker. I'm just gonna say.
Yeah. And, hold on, yeah. Let me scan through here. I've been on the other page, so I haven't seen any of the questions.
Yeah.
Okay. So, someone asked if I stuck with 49 or 50. No, I actually made it. I read the wedding thing. I ignored the spoilers and just read it, and so that teed me off. Yeah, I want to have nothing to do with Tom King anymore. Because of that, it was once you look back and find out, like once you know his ending is terrible.
He seems to write the same ending for things too, right? I mean, that's from what it looks like. It's just like it's every ending is like, well, I guess I'll question my manhood again.
Well, you know, and the biggest thing, and it wasn't just him, it was Scott Snyder also. They're taught how to write streaming shows, not a comic book, and they're dramatically different. So for instance, it wasn't Tom King, I forget who it is, Detective Comics maybe. Anyways, there was an issue to where she used to be Batgirl. They call her Orphan or something. It's like, make her Batgirl again or something. She was one of my favorite Batgirls. Anyways, Orphan, Batman is running, and there's, I think, 7 of these ninja guys. And they beat the crap out of Batman. And then Orphan goes underground and defeats 200 of the same ninjas. And it was literally 200. And you see this repeatedly to where it don't matter if it was Red Robin or whoever it was, they would take down 50 people, and then Batman would be struggling with some fat guy in the corner. And Scott Snyder did that over and over to where Batman couldn't do anything. And it's like, why is he depowered so much? But almost everybody else was overpowered. And it was so frustrating to read, to where because and like Cassandra Cain, I loved her in Post Crisis.
Yeah.
Because I like the idea that she has a duel with Batman. They're just, sparring. And she could defeat Batman, possibly. And it's interesting because she can't speak.
Right.
Because it's replaced with fighting. And so on one thing, it's interesting that even her honed and disabled so that she can fight harder can only match Batman. But it was for both characters, it was like this enthused thing. It was so cool.
Yeah. And I actually I love Cassandra Cain. I did like her as Batgirl. I really did. I'm super cool with her not being Batgirl because I love Steph Brown's character evolution.
Yeah, that was good.
And the fact that they took it away to give it to Babs, who
was already Oracle.
Growing past Batgirl was the perfect move for her. And like Cassandra Cain, I think the Black Bat name was stupid. I don't know what you call her. But like having her move past being Batgirl, I think is a good move too.
Yeah.
But as far as the narrative story, but like for Steph to achieve Batgirlness is like the pinnacle of her journey, and I think it's great. And so that was also one of the things about the New 52 I couldn't stand, was just like, what, you doing this to Steph? Really?
Right.
Really?
Oh, the 5th thing they did to her. I've never seen a character get more abused and betrayed by writers in my entire life. So she rises up and becomes Batgirl. And it's this big thing because it's not been a smooth journey for her.
No.
But it is this moment, And was it then she becomes Robin?
Yeah, well, they erased that because she was Robin for a very brief time.
Yeah.
And then she was killed. And then she came back in the Robin series, and things were really weird with her and Tim, and it was a whole deal. And then Damian shows up, and then she was spoiler again. because she was spoiler and co-starred in Cassandra Cain's Batgirl book.
Right.
And they were like besties, which was an awesome dynamic. And then she became Batgirl, and then the New 52, and then she was spoiler again and had never been anything.
Right. They
but sucked like her entire history out and like started her over.
Yeah, and Cassandra Cain was the same way. She was only orphan. And but both of them, I loved Stephanie Brown as Robin. I was like this because they had you can't, if you put all the Robins next to each other, they made them all look alike, on purpose, where they're always the same height, the same hair, and they may have different costumes, but it's hard to tell them apart. I loved Stephanie Brown as Robin. I loved the living hell out of it. And so it was kind of a redemption thing when she I was thinking it's the other way around, but it's a redemption thing when she becomes Batgirl. And it's ironic because, I guess it goes back to the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So Gail Simone, who is the one that decided to do Barbara Gordon to take away Oracle. Yeah, she was incredibly more effective.
Far more. It was well, and here's the thing. Here's the thing about Gail with the Delio. You could also pinpoint the moment DC Comics were absolutely done.
Yeah.
Was the moment that Gail Simone huffed her way out of the Dixonverse message boards.
Okay.
When she felt like she had attained enough where she could flip Chuck Dixon the finger and walk away.
Right.
And that was a moment in time. But additionally, she had said for years and years, we're never going to make Barbara walk again. It's never going to happen. It's a degradation of her character to take Oracle away from her. Mm-hmm. This is an evolution. It's hard. I know you don't like it. I know you think it doesn't make sense in a superhero universe, but this is the better character.
Right.
Her weaker is her stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take this away from her. She said this for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
A decade. And then DC comes in and says, hey, here's this new 52 money. Would you like some?
Right.
Would you like some new 52 money? She's like, I've been wrong. I've been wrong forever. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't understand this at all.
Now, y'all know I'm kind of half libtard. So here's the deal. There's one popular handicapped character in all of comic books, and they basically retconned her so that the level of horribleness they did. You have Stephanie Brown, which is this struggle, with all of these issues women deal with, she is like everything. Horrible.
Well, and here's the thing, man, about Stephanie Brown's character that I loved. Okay, so I'm very opposite. I'm super conservative, right?
Yeah.
So the moment that Steph Brown gives up her baby to adoption,
right.
I was weeping reading that book because that's a beautiful story, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just and the fact that and that they referenced it, that she was just like, I hope my baby is okay.
Right.
That she felt it and you felt it. And it was just regret and the pity of you. You're like, oh my God, just getting to you. And then to see her go through this and fight through it. And Tim's I'm here for it if you need it. And she's like, I don't.
Yeah.
I have the strength. And she did. And she had the strength. Right. Then she becomes Robin. And then she comes back from the dead. And she's become Batgirl, right?
Yeah.
And and she's like, oh my goodness. It's a real human journey.
Right. And ironically, that's a powerful social justice storyline in which you say, this girl made mistakes, but she's not done. We don't discard people like that. She can rise again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's the exact same storyline of Barbara. Yes, she was in a wheelchair, but her mind is more powerful than her body, and that she can become far more important in a wheelchair than with her fists. And that's my problem with modern social justice storylines, is that I'm sure they have the best of intentions, but I've never read stories more offensive in my entire life, because it's not from the heart. These are not, they are looking at Twitter and what's trending and hashtags and just writing it, because there was someone who said, shouldn't you write what you know from your own personal experiences? A liberal writer from the 90s would say, yes, do not just make crap up. You need to feel it. It needs to be real. But you fast forward to now, and they would say, no, it needs to be other things you haven't experienced. That's what a writer does. It's like, no, because you don't know what it's like. And therefore, everything you write is going to be ill-informed, especially when writers go from poor to lower middle class writers to now upper middle class to wealthy writers. They don't know. And it is so clear that they don't know, because
I think a big part of it too is like one of the other things that's so different is that they've extracted the individuality from characters.
Yeah.
And they want to treat people as categories. And so we need one of these and one of these and one of these.
Yeah.
And you know, and on the one hand, like I think like I said, part of a writer's job is to learn a bunch of stuff so they can apply it.
Right.
So, like, you know, if you want, like Mike Barron wrote the Butcher miniseries about a Native American spy who, like, his father was murdered in a land dispute, and he goes on a vengeance rampage. It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
And like, and like growing up around Lakota people, like it's pretty faithful, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he did some research. He met some people. He knows the stuff, right?
Yeah.
And he writes about like the terrain of the Thunderhead National grassland. I've been there. He gets it, right? Because he went out and he experienced some life and he put it in his book, right?
Right.
And then, but more than that, he's treating these people as individuals, right? And he's seeing how these people play that. So it's not about just finding somebody that fits the category to fit in there. It's like, we need to get, let's get us a black Spider-Man.
Right.
Okay, but who is this dude? Who is this kid? Let's worry about. But who Miles is, he's not just, Black Peter Parker. He's his own dude. Let's write him as that way.
And that's the most important thing, I think, with superheroes, especially today, is that we have so much freedom to do things differently than they were ever done before. We have tools beyond what they had before, but those tools sometimes get in the way, because it's not just important that we, I think it's important for storytelling, and there's too much of, society needs this. It's like, no, you need to tell a good story. And I do agree that I love comics about characters that aren't just a billionaire that buys a cool car. I love these. I love the idea of what they're saying. They're not totally wrong. It's that they are bad at what they do. It's hard to explain this to where you go, it's not me, it's you. And it's not the spirit of what you're doing, it's your execution. You're too isolated and inexperienced to understand what it's like. A guy living in a trailer park knows more about a person living in the ghetto than an upper middle class person knows about either. And so, they think, I'm living in New York, I know what poor Black people want. It's like, why would you? No,
because he walks by them on the way to the Met.
Right. Right. A person living in Kansas would know a hell of a lot more, because, poor people are the same,
Yeah.
And that's the irony. They divide people by races and sexes. It's like, no, we're identical. I don't think about Kira and Nora being girls. I mean, I do, for roughly the thing, but the way they talk and the things they talk about and all this is just what people talk about. I'm not sitting there going, they need a girl story.
Well, and that's one thing, like, Chuck Dixon got a lot of questions back in the day when he was doing Birds of Prey. They're like, how do you write women so realistically? And he's like, 4 sisters and a wife.
Right.
What do you want out of me?
Yeah. And, you know, me and my wife talk about the same things and make the same jokes. And it's this irony that in the 90s, this was not the idea that all humans are practically the same. And there's no real Venus and Mars thing. We're all just the same people. But what you're seeing is classes of people, you know, like they're like, well, a poor guy's all like farting, but the rich lady's all up a doodle. It's like, yeah, that has to do with one's poor and one's rich. It has nothing to do with that they're male or female. And a married couple's the same way, you know. There's slight differences, but overall,
well, yeah, I mean, and I think there are differences in the ways that like men and women, like what motivates men and women, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's differences in things that they enjoy, right? Like girls don't like football. The girls that like football don't like football because their guys like football. They like football because they like football.
Right.
You know, that's it. I mean, sometimes girls get into football because of their significant other or whatever, but if they like it for liking it.
Right. And, you know, you see that with like everything, Legos, when they were like, wow, it's like 50-50 women, girls and boys like Legos. We should make Legos for girls. It's like, I'm pretty certain they like Legos. I don't know why you would make, and of course the girls' Legos bombed because girls liked Legos. And comic.
Well, they actually, Legos has found a middle ground by making really involved sets. Like some of their girls' Legos are selling now, because they're the ones that are licensed because people like the characters, and they're all of they have the little girl figurines, and everything else is just a Lego.
Right. It's the same.
They figured it out.
Making the
big houses. Okay.
Right. And the characters looking better isn't a bad idea. You can only paste that image on so many. But, you know, comics and video games have suffered the same thing, is that they found that they had 50-50 to some degree. And then, or, you know, they say, oh, we have this segment. And sometimes it's lesser than, you know, they go like a superhero movie. They go, wow, it's 75% men and 25% women. And they go, well, maybe we need to target women more with these superhero movies. It's like, well, here's the problem. Women are a majority of moviegoers. More women go to movies than men do. They go to different ones. Now, that 25% is most definitely usually going with a significant other or something. And that is that there is a little difference sometimes.
Yeah.
That it's what me and my wife read. She reads comic books more than me, to be honest. She likes really intelligent stuff from Image. I like stupid crap. And so, you know, there is this different deal to where, well, Birds of Prey, you know, they were like, oh, women are going to dig this. It's like, what part of Birds of Prey made you think they would like this? Look at all the other movies they watch. Has any of them been dumb as crap? No. Now, preteen girls did go to Twilight and stuff because it was the book they read that they liked. But there you go. I go to a movie because it's a comic book I read, a 20-page comic book.
And here's one of the things that boggles my mind too, right? You want to go back in time, right? DC back in the 60s discovered, right, that Aquaman was being read mostly by 9-year-old girls. There was a large number of 9-year-old girls that were reading Aquaman, and there were boys that read Aquaman too. And so they leaned into the romance. They leaned into the underwater kingdom stuff. They leaned into the seahorses and all that kind of stuff that girls liked. And then the boys that liked Aquaman still kept liking that stuff because they liked it. Right. And so that's how you get Aquaman and Mera being a power couple all the way up until the end of the 70s, right? Because or even into the 80s, because that's what was selling with the 9-year-old girl demographic.
And
now I love that stuff because, you know, as previously mentioned, I think marriage is wonderful, and so the whole thing is something I love. But it was one of those nuts things, right?
And you can target demographics. You just got to really understand how complex they are.
Well, and it was one of those things that had already happened. It wasn't like they were like, let's snatch the 9-year-old girl market. They're like, oh, girls are going from reading Patsy Walker to reading Aquaman. Let's keep doing what we're doing because we have a market now.
Well, exactly. And see, they I got to get off here. I was supposed to get off like an hour and a half ago. Tomb Raider is a similar thing that it was very popular among women from 96. You know, the whole series had a large base of women players. And so then when they rebooted it, they were targeting them hard and lost sales because women like Tomb Raider. And then they said, well, maybe they'll like it better if we target them. It's like, but your fans liked what you were doing. So you don't understand what women want. And that's a movie. But, you know, and that is, us nerds are not, that's kind of like if you made a comic all about macho man stuff and you go, why ain't all these male nerds reading it? It's like, well, we're nerds. we're reading.
We want the morality plays, the power fantasies.
Right. We're reading comic books, mind you.
I don't want to read a comic book about auto repair.
Our names are obviously not T-Bass. I don't know if you've ever been to a comic book convention, but we're all a little weird. And so, you know, that's female nerds are weird as the male nerds. And somehow the industry has not grasped that we're weird.
And that's one of the things that, you know, flashing back to some earlier in the conversation, not to keep you on too long, but talking about, you know, European comics and everything and how they're different. Neo asked, is the difference in craftsmanship mean better stories? Not necessarily, but they're different stories and they have a different market and genres, right? And we've narrowed so much of our comic reading genre, market to just the genre thing. So it's all superheroes. Right. And even though superheroes have other kinds of stuff in them, and that happened, you know, in the 80s, pretty much. Not exclusively, there were other stuff that went in there, but it was just kind of the direct market, I think, killed the actual market for variety of comics in a lot of ways.
And the 50s and 60s was bad because actually Jack Kirby made a fortune writing war and romance, mainly romance. I forget how much it was. It was a ridiculous amount. It had to be like some of the most a comic book artist had ever made on page rate doing romance novels. And the reason he hated Marvel is because he went from making this massive salary to nothing doing the stuff everybody remembers him for. He would have been like, oh, yeah, the romance stuff, I've made a fortune. But yeah, we lost all those genres and become superheroes where Europe, there is no specific genre. They're certainly more adult orientated than they always have been.
And they have a bunch of different kinds of adventure stuff and all the other kind of stuff. And that's like in Japan, of course, they make a comic for every taste.
Know?
And they're making the best superhero books right now. You know, My Hero Academia, One Punch Man, those kind of things. They're way better than Bendis can do on screen.
And you know, and there is a fad thing. America had their, because you know, you could argue about what America could do to get back the industry, but the reality is the industry is doing very good. We just aren't it, and nothing will change that. There's no amount of nothing you could do to Batman or Superman that would make people go, okay, I'm not reading anime. No, the anime is one. It's going to dominate this decade.
Even if DC and Marvel start finding a way of getting new fans, which I think there are lots of ways of doing it. It's not just because they have some sort of fancy trick that they pull in this next issue of Batman available at your local comic shop. There are systemic model problems, which we'll probably talk about on the show in a couple of weeks when Perch and RJ and Mike Hutchison are back.
That's right. And
we'll go ahead and use it as a segue because I know you say you got to go.
I got to go.
Yeah. And it's late for me too. So, Tonic, thanks for coming on. Everybody, I don't have a link in the description yet, but go to Indiegogo and type in Saving the World #3, and you'll find the most recent edition of the amazing Saving Verse. And go check it out, guys. Do it. You know you want to. Put the money on the barrelhead.
That's right.
And if you have anything left over, go to check out idealcomics.net/shop and get some e-comics if you feel like it. You know.
Oh, and my Kickstarter launches tomorrow at noon, high noon.
In Central Time, right?
Yes, Central Time, the only time.
Yeah, that's not true.
Texas.
And we're in Mountain here. We run the show.
Is Nebraska in Mountain?
Parts of it are. Most of the pan. If you know where North Platte is, it's about 15 miles west of North Platte, where Mountain Time starts.
Do you ever cross it?
Oh yeah,
that'd be weird.
Yeah, Lincoln, our state capital, is in Central Time, and we're out in Mountain Time. So
I've never left Central. Furthest I traveled was Mexico, but still Central.
Yeah, I've been in a bunch of time zones. Yep.
Okay.
I've never left the continental states, but I've been in a bunch of time zones.
I see.
Yeah, because we have a bunch. Anyway, later, everybody. Bye.
Bye.